Yo, what is up, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video. The trade deadline has came and went for the 2022 NBA season, and there was a lot of things that happened. Big names being moved, a couple small moves for contenders, and everything in between. And of course, with the trade deadline and about 17 trades going down, there are going to be teams that both won and lost the deadline. Some of these, it is too early to really tell who is going to win or lose these trades, but I thought it'd be fun if I went through and gave you some of my biggest winners and losers of the trade deadline. Now, these could completely change in like a couple weeks or so, and this is not every single team. If you want to see me break down every single trade that happens, let me know in the comment section below and like the video to let me know that you do want to see that. Also, make sure to subscribe. I'm going to keep dropping videos about the trade deadline, and just as we go towards the All-Star break and eventually the playoffs, NBA content coming every single day. So, we're going to start off with my first winner and probably my biggest winner of the trade deadline, the Philadelphia 76ers. Finally, getting rid of the Ben Simmons situation that's been really hanging over the franchise's head for the better part of a year now. It's been a really long time that situation has been going on, and kind of as like a side note, also a win for all of us that we don't have to hear about Ben Simmons trade rumors anymore. It ends up working out for the Sixers. Daryl Morey said he was going to get a top 25 player for Ben Simmons, and he ended up getting one in James Harden, who I personally think is going to fit really well next to Joel Embiid. They didn't even have to give up Tyrese Maxey or Matisse Thybulle. They're two young studs, so they held on to those guys. They've got a really solid team, and I personally think the Harden trade makes the Sixers potentially favorites out there in the Eastern Conference alongside the Milwaukee Bucks and maybe the Miami Heat once they get healthy and get Victor Oladipo back. You could also throw the Brooklyn Nets in there. It depends how the Ben Simmons situation works out. If Kyrie is able to play home games, we'll see on that front. But for right now, I think the Sixers very clearly had a great trade deadline, even if they didn't bring anyone else in. Just bringing in James Harden and clearing up that whole situation is a big win for Daryl Morey and that team's front office. My first loser of the trade deadline, and also once again maybe my potentially biggest loser, the Los Angeles Lakers. They did nothing. Not a single trade went down for a team that is multiple games under 500, despite wanting to compete for a championship, so it looks like they're kind of just committed to being in the play-in. I am stunned that not a single move was made. Maybe there really was no good moves, but even so, I feel like there had to have been something out there that could have made this team better. There's reports that the Rockets offered them the John Wall swap for Russell Westbrook, and they turned that down, which I personally don't think the John Wall move made a ton of sense anyways. There's also reports that the Lakers offered Russell Westbrook for for Buddy Hield. Not quite sure how true that is. Came from the Athletics, so they're pretty reliable, but the Kings reportedly turned that one down, so they did kind of evaluate some moves. But still, the fact that they made not a single move is a huge blow to this team. They're already not on the level of other contenders, and by making no moves, they've kind of committed to the season being a wash. Unless things somehow turn around drastically, the pieces just somehow find a way to fit together, this is just going to be kind of a wasted season for this Lakers team. There's no chance they catch those upper echelon Western Conference teams without like a potentially big buyout market move, and even then, the names that are going to be available on that market aren't big enough for me personally to really shift the future of this Lakers team. So they're probably my biggest loser of the trade deadline. Another winner for the trade deadline are the Indiana Pacers. They finally committed to trying to rebuild, and I think I really like the pieces that they brought back. Now, they didn't trade Miles Turner, and I think that's fine. I think you can either trade him in the offseason, or you could even hold on to him. He's still pretty young. And now that you've cleared up the logjam of him and Domantas Sabonis at the center position, I think things could fit a lot better now. In trading Sabonis, they brought in Tyrese Halliburton, who I think is an amazing young piece, as well as Buddy Hield, who's a good shooter that's going to help them out. They brought in Jalen Smith in a trade for Torrey Craig, who's another young piece that they can add to this rebuild. And I just think the Pacers did a great job of starting to head the right direction for this team's future. I think they got a nice young piece to build around in Tyrese Halliburton, took a flyer on another young piece, bringing in a pick. They did what they needed to do as a team that is heading towards the rebuild, and ultimately, they are going to go down the path of tanking the rest of this season. So when you add Tyrese Halliburton, Jalen Smith, Chris Duarte, and the other young pieces that they have, even if they trade like a guy like a Malcolm Brogdon, I think ultimately going down the line, they are going to be one of the top teams in the lottery, bringing that pick to add to that young core. And I think they've got something kind of fun and interesting brewing there in Indiana. So trading LeVert, trading Domantas Sabonis, trading Torrey Craig, just trading off some of those pieces, I think it's a good start to their rebuild. My second loser of the trade deadline are the Dallas Mavericks. The only move they made was to trade Kristaps Porzingis for Spencer Dinwiddie, who kind of already fills the role that Jalen Brunson does, and Davis Bertans, both of which are on terrible contracts, trading their second best player in Kristaps Porzingis. I haven't seen a single person kind of understand this trade. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It makes sense to get off of Kristaps' contract, but why are you going to trade that for 2 bad contracts in return? Dinwiddie has not been good this season. He's really struggled shooting the ball. He's been an all right facilitator, but he's shooting like 31% from 3. And if you're trying to put him next to Luka Doncic, that doesn't make sense. Is he going to come off the bench now? And if so, you're paying a backup point guard that much money. Bertans, whose one goal is to shoot, cannot shoot anymore. He's making like 16, 17, and then $18 million over the next few seasons, which is a surplus of money for a guy that is his one job is to shoot, and he's shooting like 31% from 3. It just doesn't make sense to me. They even threw in a pick with Kristaps to get this package back. I understand trading Kristaps, but it doesn't make sense to me. I feel like there had to have been a better package out there. Even if this trade ends up working out for them, I still feel like there had to have been something better out there. And to be honest, I don't see it working out for them very well. So I don't like what the Mavericks did. I don't really see anyone who thinks that they made a good trade here. If you are one of those people, let me know. But for right now, I think people kind of agree that this was a weird trade for the Dallas Mavericks. My next winner of the trade deadline were the New Orleans Pelicans. They got CJ McCollum, who I think is a really fun piece for this team, adding him to a team of Zion when he does come back, Brandon Ingram, Jonas Valanciunas, Devontae Graham. You've got a pretty fun team there in New Orleans, and I think it is time for them to kind of try and win. Sure, maybe this doesn't necessarily make them a contender, but with the development you're going to see from Zion and Ingram, assuming Zion can get healthy, this all does hinge on Zion getting healthy. But even so, even if Zion doesn't end up getting super healthy, or say the season is like a wash and like CJ McCollum doesn't work out super well, they didn't have to give up much. They gave up Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who I still think has a lot of potential, but has been pretty disappointing on the season, and even so didn't seem like a great fit next to these guys. They're just trying to take that next step, and I can appreciate them kind of going for that. So the New Orleans Pelicans, for me, not having to give up much for a guy in CJ McCollum who could be really big for them, especially if Zion comes back. And if he reaches his potential alongside Ingram, Valanciunas, CJ McCollum, that's a really fun squad out there in the Western Conference. So the Pelicans are one of the winners for me. Next loser are the New York Knicks, for the same reason why the Lakers are a loser, because they didn't do anything. Now, the Knicks situation is a bit different because they're not really contenders like the Lakers are trying to be. Of course, the Knicks do want to win. They do want to win a championship. But for right now, I think everyone's kind of realized that the Knicks really just aren't destined for that this season. So they had 2 options. They could either do something to try and make that the possibility by trading for like a CJ McCollum or something like that. Just try to add more pieces to this team to try and up their ceiling, or they could trade off pieces and they could get younger and kind of just shift back towards a rebuild. We had that great season last year, just not really replicating, so we can trade some of our pieces like a Fournier, like an Alec Burks maybe, just some other guys, and kind of recenter around RJ Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, maybe Julius Randle. There were even rumors that some team was going to try and trade for him, and they did nothing. Nothing. They're just going to kind of chill, I guess. Julius Randle has kind of been finding his stride, so maybe if that's the case, maybe the Knicks can make the play-in tournament, but the Eastern Conference is really tough, and so I'm not even sure if they're going to make the play-in. They've got a young guy in Cam Reddish who they just traded for that their coach doesn't want to play, and they didn't clear up any roster space for him, so I'm not quite sure what he's going to do. The Knicks just kind of feel like they're stuck between competing and rebuilding at the same time, and that's a weird space for them to be in. I thought they would commit to one direction or another, but they really kind of just stayed in the middle. And for me, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Maybe there just wasn't any good value moves for their veteran guys, but I feel like there had to have been something out there. So for me, they are a loser at the deadline. My 4th winner of the trade deadline are the Los Angeles Clippers, because when Kawhi Leonard and Paul George get back, they're going to be very, very hard to beat out there in the Western Conference. Bringing in Norman Powell, bringing a couple decent guys in like a Rodney Hood, Semi Ojeleye. Nothing too crazy, but turning off a contract in Serge Ibaka. This Clippers team just looks really, really good on paper when they do get healthy. You've got bringing in Norman Powell gives you another scoring option. Sometimes the Clippers offense would get kind of stagnant, and so to bring in another shot creator and shot maker in Norman Powell can really help them out. They just all around continue to add on pieces to this team. They've already been solid as a team throughout this portion of the season where they haven't had Paul George or Kawhi Leonard. So when they get those two back, this team is going to be super scary in the Western Conference, and they just continue to fortify things. I think the Clippers did a very good job of adding a piece of Norman Powell without having to give up too much either. So this is a big win for them, as well as Robert Covington, who I didn't even mention, is a solid piece for them as well. I think he's going to fit well. Even if he's not having a good season, I think he's just a decent piece to have on a team that's trying to contend. So I like this deadline a lot for the Clippers. My last loser of the trade deadline are the Portland Trail Blazers. I mean, okay, I understand what they're going for. Their goal was to trade away salaries to kind of go into this next offseason with kind of clean books and just try and shape this team around Damian Lillard. The problem is, for me, I don't really know who's going to come play in Portland. They're getting all of this salary cap room, but Portland's never really been a trade or like a free agent destination. So unless they plan on getting like a Bradley Beal somehow, if they're willing to give Jeremy Grant a bunch of money, I don't really understand what the cap space is necessarily going to do for them. Now, it will let them bring in and absorb bigger contracts, which could be valuable down the line. But my big issue is that in trading Norman Powell and CJ McCollum, their second and third best players, they didn't get anything. They really didn't get much. They got back Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who was like the biggest piece that they got in return, but then they traded him away. So their youngest piece that they got, trying to kind of rebuild and tank and just rebuild this team next season, they traded him away for Joe Ingles in like a salary dump trade. And once again, that does clear up salary cap, but if they don't hit on their free agents, this is going to be a terrible deadline for them. So if they hit on their free agents, this could change drastically. But for right now, even, I don't like the returns they got from McCollum and Norman Powell. I feel like there had to have been some way to get more from those two guys. I don't know. It just feels like trading Gary Trent Jr. for Norman Powell and then not getting much back at all for Norman Powell, as well as trading 2 firsts for Robert Covington and putting him in a trade with Norman Powell to not get much back. It doesn't make sense. So I don't really understand what they're necessarily going for with that, but ultimately, if they hit on free agents, maybe this could end up being a good deadline in the future, but for right now, I really don't like it. Finally, my last winner of the trade deadline are the Cleveland Cavaliers. They bring in Caris LeVert, which I think is a huge move for them. Caris LeVert, I think, is going to give them another ball handler, another playmaker, just someone that can continue to help this Cleveland team. I like what they did a lot. I think they've fortified themselves just with that one trade. Ricky Rubio, he's a contract that is expiring, and he's someone that is out for the season anyway. So bringing in Caris LeVert to kind of replicate that role of like a playmaker, ball handler, I think will be super helpful for them. And now going forward for the future, having another young guy in Caris LeVert alongside Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, Isaac Okoro, and Sexton if you choose to bring him back. But even if you don't choose to bring back Sexton, you could now trade him because you have a guy in LeVert who I think you could slot into that lineup just as well, and he may even fit better. So ultimately, I think this is a really good deadline for the Cavs, both going forward and even right now. So I like it a lot for them. I think they did a good job, and they are my last winner of the trade deadline. So let me know who your biggest winners and losers were. Let me know what you think about your favorite team. I'm sure some people are going to ask me my thoughts on the Thunder. I thought it was fine. I didn't think we necessarily needed to make any moves. Sure, we could have gone out and got a young center like a Bamba, like a Thomas Bryant, like Marvin Bagley got traded to the Pistons. Maybe we could have done something like that. But ultimately, I think the team is fine as it is. These are moves we can make in the offseason if we really want to make them. We brought in a guy in Casey Okpala and got a Heat pick that is improved from the Heat pick we had originally. So all around, I think it was a solid deadline for the Thunder if you were curious. Nothing much happened at all, but overall, we didn't really need to do much. So those are my thoughts on the trade deadline. If you want to see any more videos on it, comment ideas down below. I appreciate y'all watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. I will see you all later. Real One Say Back.